Welcome back to Never Did It. I'm Brad Garoon, and I'm here with Jake Ziegler. On Never Did It, we explore the last 100 years in an effort to fill in some of our own movie blind spots. And today we're covering the year 2008 with the films Frost Nixon by Ron Howard and Hunger by Steve McQueen, the director, not the actor, because it's 2008 and Steve McQueen is long dead.
You know what's funny about that is that my friend Dan Hogue recently, he goes to a lot of movies, and he saw Blitz, the new Steve McQueen movie, and he was seeing this same woman. She would go to like basically every movie, and she wouldn't know anything about any of them. She's just an older kind of retired woman. She just goes to the movies. And finally saw her at Blitz, and they were talking about it, and she just mentioned, goes, "Oh, I didn't know that, Steve McQueen was directing movies," and he had to tell her that it was not that Steve McQueen, and he's been dead for 40 years. Oh, I didn't know that. You're just this sweet old lady.
That's very fun. I love seeing old people at movies that you don't expect to see them at. Like I saw Conclave, that was all old people. Drive-Away Dolls, that was one where I saw some old people walking out. The other place that I saw old people, I think I've talked about this on the show before, even was in Thelma, which is relevant now again because the guy from Thelma is one of the bad guys in the new Gladiator movie, which I just
really?
yeah.
Oh, neat. Okay.
Yeah, I loved listening to them at the end of Thelma because they were so cute the way they're like, "Oh, it so reminded me of my grandson," and da-da-da-da-da. Very fun. Then they said some edgier stuff than I expected too, but this is New York. Well, okay, Steve McQueen, let's talk about Hunger. So I recommended that for you because I was surprised you hadn't seen it. It just seemed like a major Jake movie. It's the story of Bobby Sands, who was an IRA member who went on a hunger strike during the Troubles in Ireland. And he goes on this hunger strike along with a bunch of other IRA members, and the movie is about that, the morality of him bringing other people into this strike, and then what he went through, literally what he experienced as he wasted away from hunger. Stars Michael Fassbender and a bunch of Irish people, including Liam Cunningham, who I couldn't remember when we had Jeff Richardson on. Actually, I think that's a future episode, but who in a future episode I will have trouble remembering as a priest, although he's not in that much of it. Actually, he's in 25% of it because the centerpiece of this movie is this scene between just Bobby Sands and this priest talking about the morality of the hunger strike and what it will mean for Sands to essentially kill himself, although he rejects that it's a suicide, and what it means to bring other people into this strike, especially given how unlikely it seems that anything will change as a result of this hunger strike. What he wants directly is changes in their prison conditions. They want to be seen as political prisoners. That's been scrapped by the British government during this period, which means they could wear their own clothes in prison. They'd have to be captivity together. All the political prisoners would have to be kept together and not in the general population. And that they'd only be forced to do a certain amount of labor. Those were the demands. And I think a few more. And it just seems really unlikely that any of them will be met. And these guys are tortured throughout the movie. So, I saw it, I think 3 years ago and really liked it and was shocked you hadn't seen it. And I'm curious what you thought of it.
I mean, it's brutal. Like I said, it's a tough watch. It's no fun at all. But I was surprised I hadn't seen it too. Just because I do remember when it came out. This is Steve McQueen's debut movie, so he hadn't really had a name yet. Fassbender wasn't really Fassbender yet. He hadn't been Magneto yet. Hadn't even really. Obviously the later McQueen stuff hadn't come yet. Like Shame hadn't even come yet since obviously this is McQueen's first movie. But I do remember hearing about it, and I'm pretty sure Ebert had it even in his top 10 that year or whatever. I'm pretty sure I remember him rating it very highly. So I don't know why it slipped past me when it came out, and then it continued to evade me over the years, especially even as I watched other McQueen movies. Shame, I thought, was really overrated and overhyped for what it was. I remember not particularly caring for that, but then of course 12 Years a Slave came out, and that movie is tremendous, just a great film. And then Widows I really liked too, and I feel like that movie's kind of been a little bit forgotten in the last couple of years, but I think just as far as like heist movies go, that's just a really, really cool movie. Viola Davis is just badass in that movie, and Elizabeth Debicki is cool in that. It's just a really cool movie, and it's one I've actually been meaning to revisit because I haven't seen it since the theater, but I remember it being really, really cool. So yeah, I don't know why I didn't see Hunger. I'm glad it came up on the podcast and especially with Blitz coming out this year, it was a good time to go back and revisit that one. But it's hard. It's a hard watch. Like I said, these guys get tortured, and they don't really shy away from showing a lot of what they're going through. Like I said, you feel the futility of what they're doing, where there's not a lot of hope to it, where you really do feel like, yeah, these demands are never going to be met. They're not going to, the hunger strike is not going to provide what they're asking or what they're going for. And there is just really awfulness hanging over the whole movie. I mean, that being said, it's expertly made. The acting by everyone, Fassbender carries the movie, of course. And then that one scene, of course, with the priest is just dynamite. And I didn't know that was happening either. As it started, I wasn't aware that this is going to be a 25-minute scene. I hadn't heard that. I didn't know that. So, as it's happening, I'm just kind of, like my eyes just kind of get wider and wider as it goes. Like, oh my gosh, they're doing this. And then it just kept going and going. And it wasn't like like I was upset by this, or I was just like, oh my God, they're going. Like, wow, like this is really, really interesting and really fascinating. They're just playing it so perfectly. We've mentioned Fassbender before, not the best person, but my God, man, that man can act in just about anything, and he just killed it in this movie. He's so good in this. So yeah, it's a tremendous movie. I'm glad I watched it.
Can I tell you, you mentioned Fassbender not the best guy. He has some allegations of abuse against him. People get real mad when we bring that stuff up on the podcast. I was looking at the comments in our YouTube short about Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, and we got two stripes of comments. One was, it's just called The Road Warrior, and I was like, okay, well, not actually. I got a DVD cover to show you. I think it was only called The Road Warrior in the United States when it came out because no one had seen Mad Max. In Australia, it was very much Mad Max 2 in its country of origin. And then the other one is, at one point I say, if you can stomach watching a Mel Gibson movie, then you'll really like this. And I can tell you, like, I work with people who have not seen Fury Road or Furiosa because they're like, well, I didn't want to watch the first three because of Mel Gibson. I'm like, here's the bright side. You don't have to. They're not really connected.
At all. I'd say at all. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, just start with Fury Road, and also they're way better.
Or start with Furiosa if you choose at this point.
That's true. I think it works both ways. I've watched them in both orders. Mm-hmm. You could just watch them back and forth forever.
Yes.
But people were mad. They're like, Mel Gibson is this, and this movie would be nothing without Mel Gibson. And my response is always, I never said Mel Gibson shouldn't be in it. I quite like the movie. I'm just acknowledging that some people don't like watching this guy.
Right. I like all three of the original Mad Max movies, but that doesn't mean that Mel Gibson doesn't suck.
Yeah. I'll watch Payback any day. I think that movie freaking rocks.
Hey, that's a good for me.
Oh, it's so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
But some people don't want to watch that because he's in it. And I think that's fine.
I still like Apocalypto.
Yeah, well, he's not in it. You don't have to look at him.
That's true. Yeah, he does show up. His face is in it for like 1 second.
Oh, really?
He's got a little cameo. It's like in one of the scenes where it's like the high priest or whatever their leader is, or whatever, and he's in full makeup, whatever. So like you only know it's him if you know it's him, sort of thing. But as a director, he's directed a couple good ones.
Leave it to Mel Gibson to not shy away from brownface.
Yeah, absolutely.
People will be mad at that. Anyway. Can we hone in real quick on that scene? So the 25-minute scene.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you already did hone in on it. So
a little more.
Yeah. So the first 17 minutes of it are one shot too. And I read recently that they did that in 5 takes, which I had always wondered, did McQueen want the whole 25-minute bit to be that shot? And it seems like no. It seems like he always wanted when Fassbender reaches for the cigarettes for the second time, for that to be a cut. And I think it's really well done. Like, I think that movement from this wide shot of just the two of them looking at each other. And it's also quite hard. I'm like, for you're always watching movies with captions. I'm not. And I very much had to because their accents are thick and they're saying things I don't understand in their brogue. But incredible. Like in an upcoming episode, we talked about this a little bit because we talked about scenes that are long with no cuts or just long scenes of two people talking. And you mentioned the scene in or the whole movie of The Sunset Limited. You do get kind of a stage play vibe from the beginning, at least like the first 5 minutes of this scene, because they're going back and forth at a very fast clip to keep you engaged because the camera's not moving. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was brilliant. And it's a short movie. This movie you mentioned, it's tough to watch because they're really being brutalized. And I'll get to the morality of it in a minute. I don't think it's moral to torture anyone ever, but there's a morality question of like what they're in prison for and what they're doing. But the movie goes by so fast because it's so short, and a quarter of it is this conversation, and then a lot of it is spent in a hospital bed. What I really liked about the scene was that it called into question whether this was a righteous crusade. Because I think it's very easy to turn these movies into hagiographies where the person is a saint and what they were doing is right. Like, history has borne out that this was the right way to go. So we're going to make a movie where that was obvious the whole time. And the people who ran in opposition to these people were wrong. And I don't think that you can at all say that what Liam Cunningham as the priest is saying to him is wrong. So I really liked that it brought this moral gray area to what is on the surface, like, oh, a hunger strike. How could that ever be wrong? Well, here's all the reasons. The main one being you're sending these boys to their death. And two, what does this do to your average housewife and mother in Ireland? What does this do for her? It's not addressing any of her concerns, which are completely different than your concerns in prison. I thought that was, I loved that.
And well, because they had it set to go where it was like, okay, he's Bobby Sands was going to like start the hunger strike, and then it was going to be like in 2 weeks, then the next one was going to go, and then like 2 weeks they had it like set on a schedule, which was an interesting tactic to go. What was the reason? I can't remember. I'm sorry, we watched it was like probably 3 weeks ago or a month ago now, but what was the reason?
Yeah, first I want to forgive you for not remembering, because our recording of this episode has been long delayed.
Yeah.
We watched these movies a while back. It was because people will die, and they didn't want there to be any gap in a hunger strike. So like, well, if someone dies, we have someone who's 2 weeks back or 4 weeks back who isn't quite as starved yet. Mm-hmm. So it was a dark reason. It was like, and Liam Cunningham says, so you're staggering it, because he talked about how there had been a previous hunger strike that did nothing because it stalled and started and stalled and started because people died. And he's like, so you are admitting that you're committing suicide. And then there's that great retort from Bobby Sands where he says, well, I would call this murder. Like, I'm doing this, but they're murdering. And what I love the most about it was it's not settled at the end of that conversation, nor is it settled at the end of the movie. Right. And, in real life, these guys did not get all their concessions. They got some. There wouldn't be a movie about it if they didn't get anything out of it. This didn't solve the troubles. This didn't directly lead to the Good Friday Agreement, although you could say it was a step along the way. So I don't know. I love these movies where these people who you think are borne out by history as being in the right are shown like, not necessarily. I mean, like, we're all very happy that there's peace in Ireland now. It wasn't clear that was going to be the case.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's any question that he was on the right side, like, Bobby Sands, and that they were fighting on the right side. But was it the methods that they were using? Was that the way, or was there another way that they could have achieved what they achieved? And I think, yeah, that's where, the gray area and the brilliance of the movie really shines.
I agree with you. I'm just thinking, like, just because I'm just trying to, like, be honest with myself. And I'm thinking, just because I think they were on the right side of history, does that mean anyone who experienced this, like, would victims of the IRA think that they were on the right side of history? Now, that probably plays into what you're saying, whereas, like, it's about the methods. And because any conflict, especially a religious conflict, like this Catholic versus Protestant conflict, is going to be seen differently by people on different sides. And one thing this movie does is shows all these Protestant cops being murdered by the IRA as Bobby Sands is being held. And McQueen is English, and Cunningham is Irish, and most of the cast is Irish. And it's an Irish production. But I do think it was, like, pretty ballsy to produce the movie this way, where I think no matter what, you're going to sort of align more with the protagonist, who is Bobby Sands. But you're not going to leave it feeling like he was Jesus Christ. He was a hard man who did crimes. So.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there was certainly, I found some echoes of another movie we've covered on the podcast, Battle of Algiers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the way you mentioned, like, the way that they were showing kind of both sides of the conflict and really presenting that moral gray area. I mean, I certainly think there's not a hunger without a Battle of Algiers. And just the way, Algiers was much more documentary style, and Hunger was certainly more cinematic in the way it was told. But, there's shades of that, absolutely, in the way it was presented, for sure.
It's funny because I also don't think there's a Battle of Algiers without Breathless, which is a movie I don't like. We have a podcast coming up about that. But
it's funny, you can draw all these connections with, movies that are just so on their surface very different. Are you going to necessarily, like, connect? You read a little bit about Breathless, you read a little bit about Hunger. Do those movies sound like they have anything in common? Absolutely not. But then you start seeing all these other movies, and you really talk them out, like we're doing on this podcast. This is why we were just talking about, like, about how happy we are doing this podcast and how much fun it is. And that's why, you're just making these connections left and right that, we never would have made elsewhere. And it's just really cool. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So Shame, I think, got nominated for Oscars, right?
It did not. There was buzz around him and Carey Mulligan for acting awards, but it did not.
Oh, well, and so then Hunger didn't either.
Hunger did not either, no.
I thought that so is Shame only famous because Michael Fassbender shows his penis?
Pretty much.
Okay, got it.
Good for him.
I thought it was an awards thing. Well, also, one of the scenes just takes place in a very iconic sex hotel. Or it's not a sex hotel. It's just a hotel that a lot of people go to have sex in New York because people can watch you having sex from the window. And that's what I know of it. Is that I haven't seen Shame. I still need to see Shame, and I still need to see Blitz. I have seen Small Axe, which I think you would love.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, that's another one. Like, I would love to get to them. Just, Yeah.
I mean, you don't even have to get to all of them. Some of them are better than others, and there's 5 of them. It's cool that McQueen did that. So for those who don't know, in 2019, I want to say, Steve McQueen made an anthology of films. He made 5 films that came out together on Amazon Prime. I actually think you might not be able to watch them on Prime anymore. Yeah, I know. Shucks. I'm sure you can find them. They're about the Afro-Caribbean experience in England in the 60s, 70s. And they're all good to different degrees. Some of them are incredible. Highly recommend checking out every movie in Small Axe. You recommended for me Frost Nixon.
Yes.
Talk to me about it.
First off, I have seen your Letterboxd review, and number one, the reason I recommended it is I thought you would like it more.
I liked it.
I know, but I thought you would like it more.
Okay.
With your journalism background and your interest in kind of presidential politics, I thought this would be a bigger hit. But I also recommended it because I love it, and after rewatching it, I still love it. It's a retelling of the very famous David Frost interview with Richard Nixon. It's a movie that's it's about journalism, which obviously we both have backgrounds in journalism, so I'm into that. It's told very much like it's like a boxing movie. 100% told like a boxing movie. I really liked that style of it. It's a total underdog movie, underdog versus a heavyweight, titan sort of movie. I like that about it. The performances I think were great. Yeah, I really liked this movie. It was kind of a big one from 2008. It was one of the Best Picture nominees. I was a little surprised you hadn't seen it, just because, like I said, just with the journalism and the presidential aspect of it, I thought you would have seen it. And yeah, having rewatched it, I still really like it. Think it holds up pretty well. Especially in the election year, with a lot of focus on electing a new president. I thought it would be an interesting discussion to have at this time.
Okay, so let me talk. Okay. So I like the movie. So Richard Nixon has resigned from office after the Watergate scandal and is looking for a way to like get back in the public eye because he doesn't want his legacy to be completely tarnished. And David Frost is what kind of shows was he hosting? Like variety shows?
Yeah, he's like a Ryan Seacrest type, to use the parlance of BoJack Horseman.
Great.
Yeah.
Always welcome that. So he's not taken seriously as a journalist and wants to do this interview with a post-presidential Richard Nixon. What the country wants is an admission of guilt, which Nixon didn't quite give them with his resignation. What Nixon wants is to be whitewashed, basically.
Yeah, he wants to be seen as a good guy. He doesn't want everyone to just think that that Watergate was the only thing that he did. He wants to be seen for the good things he did, and he wants to. I mean, basically, what he always wanted to be. He wanted to be liked. Basically, yeah.
So there's a lot of parallels you can draw watching this movie with our president to be, and I think the only difference is Nixon was very smart, and I agree with pretty much everything you said about it. It very much is structured like a sports movie. You've got your gathering of the team. You've got your like who's going to do what. You've got your it starts very badly for them, and then for the journalism team, and then gets better. Okay, where it faltered, I wouldn't say failed, was it's a Ron Howard movie, and I thought it was going to be more serious. And I don't need a great movie to be serious. Like The 40-Year-Old Virgin is my favorite movie. That movie is not serious. Some people would say it's not good. They're wrong. But I like things that are light. I just saw, and I've talked about this on the podcast recently, I think, I just saw A Real Pain, which is not that heavy of a movie, especially when part of it is about the Holocaust. But it's a light movie, and I think it's a 5-star movie. This, to me, just like felt like another Ron Howard movie where I kind of thought it was going to be more like Good Night and Good Luck. Like I thought it was going to be more hard-boiled, and maybe this is just a problem of expectation. But where I felt it falter was I didn't feel like we got enough of David Frost's like struggles. There was really just one scene in a hotel room where he was feeling down about himself. And beyond that, there wasn't much. I thought Rebecca Hall's character was pretty empty. Didn't really understand why she was there, except that there needed to be a woman in the movie. Mm-hmm. And what bothered me most was you have Sam Rockwell and Oliver Platt, two of the absolute best character actors of their generation. And their characters are not well defined. As an archetype well defined, Rockwell really wants Nixon to own up to war crimes during the Vietnam War and to being the brain trust behind Watergate and to admit that Watergate was wrong. and Platt similarly.
Mm.
One's a journalist and the other's a researcher, or maybe they're both journalists. What bothered me was, okay, so there's a scene that's played for laughs, and it's very funny, where they all meet Richard Nixon for the first time. Rockwell's like, I'm not going to shake his fucking hand.
Yeah.
And then, of course, he immediately shakes his hand.
Yeah.
And then there's no reckoning with that at all for the rest of the movie. In fact, he gets so mad at David Frost for being weak in the first interviews against Nixon. And it's like, you shook his hand, man. There's no connection of those two things. That made it like, so I'm like, oh, this is a Ron Howard, like it's Cinderella Man and not Rocky. You know what I mean? Like it's good, but not upper echelon.
Yeah.
It's not like connecting those little, like all the pieces are there and they're not putting them, the puzzle's not finished. So that was what bugged me. Now I thought the interview scenes were outstanding. And Frank Langella, he was nominated for an Oscar for this, right?
100%. Yes, he was.
Okay, deserved. He's incredible as Richard Nixon. Now, playing Richard Nixon is sort of a gimme. It can go in one of two directions. You've got like Richard Nixon from X-Men Days of Future Past, which is a real like kind of portrayal. And then I don't even know who the actor is playing Nixon in that movie.
I don't either, no.
And then you've got like the Altman movie and this, and like even though it's, I don't think it's quite as good, but like the Oliver Stone, Anthony Hopkins version, where like it's a real meaty role, and Langella eats it up. Yeah. And honestly, if this was just a movie called Nixon, if it was just like not Frost Nixon, I'd be like, damn,
yeah,
they did it. But there's the David Frost part of it, which I don't think is as good.
Yeah, I don't see that disconnect with Rockwell not shaking his hand and then still and then going after Frost for not being tough on him. Well, because I mean, just because Rockwell pussed out at the moment that he was supposed to, he's still going to be mad at Frost because Frost is the one doing the interview and he still wants what he wants. I mean, just because he wussed out at shaking his hand doesn't mean he's going to just all of a sudden, not get up in Frost's face about not doing the interview properly according to him. Like I don't see that as a disconnect or a fault or what did you call it?
A disconnect. To me, it's a disconnect.
I don't see that as a disconnect at all between for his character.
But like, why not? Like, why not connect it in some way, even with just like any self-reflection on Rockwell's point at any point in the movie? Like, I actually think it's fine for Rockwell to be a jerk to Frost. I'm sorry, I don't remember the character's name.
Rockwell's, I don't either.
I think it's fine and good for him to be a jerk to Frost because you need something to go wrong for Frost. You need for him to rebuild. But like, at no point can Frost be like, and you shook his hand. And like, maybe that's too cute, but I actually think this movie would have reveled in being a little cute and clever.
Well, Frost wasn't antagonistic that way, especially towards the guys, because there's that scene where they're all talking about him, and he's not there, and he's like, hey, we want to go out and celebrate. They're like, we have nothing to celebrate. This is going terribly. He's like, it's my birthday, and I just want to go out and, so there's that. I just don't think he has that antagonistic, quality in him, especially if it's people that are on his side. He eventually kind of develops that a little bit more with Nixon, towards the end of the interview. And when he gets him to admit that when Nixon goes out and says that, I'm saying when the president does it, it is not illegal. Like, man, that's a great moment.
Yeah.
But I just don't think he has that relationship with his team. I don't think he wants to have that relationship because that's just not his personality.
So I guess then my issue is there's cool stuff that is not meant to lead to other stuff, and I don't know why it's there. And to me, that's like, for lack of a better term, blue balls.
Yeah.
It's cinematic blue balls. Whereas on the other hand, like on the Nixon side, I thought the relationship between Frank Langella and his aide in Kevin Bacon is super interesting. Here's another female problem they have, though. Diane Sawyer is a character in this movie, and she doesn't get to do anything.
She's only in like one scene?
She's in a bunch, but like she doesn't have a line.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, okay, but then this is another of what I'm talking about. It's like, you've queued us up. We know who Diane Sawyer is. And even if she wasn't like that big of a piece of this historically, make her one in the movie. Like, just lie to me. Otherwise, it's cinematic blue balls. It's like you put her in the movie for nothing. Again, I'm not saying it's bad. I just think it has a lot of these like Ron Howardisms where it's like the movie needs to move and move and move and flow. And so it doesn't get to be, it just doesn't feel like prestige-y to me. And it could have felt prestige-y. Now, clearly, I'm not in the majority because this movie is highly lauded. Like you said, nominated for multiple Academy Awards. It was nominated for Best Picture. I just like wanted more out of it and thought there was more based on what I remembered people saying about it in 2008.
And I saw it then too, so I have the memories of seeing it then and everything. So it's always different, when you see a movie when it comes out versus seeing it 15 years later for the first time.
Yeah, but it's definitely a fun one to talk about. Like, I'm loving this conversation. Like, I really like hearing what you liked about it, because they are things that I liked about it too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just also like, I get angry about stuff like that.
And I'm glad you mentioned the relationship though too with Kevin Bacon. I thought Kevin Bacon was really good in this, and he was like the corner man. I love going those scenes where they do the interviews and then they break. And it's literally like they're going to their corners, and it's like, oh, Rock, here's what you got to do in the next round. It's like that's literally what they're doing, and I loved the structure of it that way. I thought that was so cool and just a really really interesting way to do it. And yeah, like you said, the interviews were just so good, and that really carries the movie. I mean, the movie is called Frost Nixon, and for me, when you deliver on the Frost Nixon scenes, you've got a successful movie.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, like, look, I gave 3.5 stars. Like, I enjoy the movie, and I enjoy it. It's in my upper tier of Ron Howard movies too. It's just not in my upper tier of Richard Nixon movies, which is a bummer because Langella, man, like, he's just killing it. I'm glad you mentioned that Kevin Bacon's his corner man too, because when he doesn't have Bacon with him is when he starts slipping. Like, he gets wasted and calls Frost on the phone, and that's great too because it shows Frost that he's human, right? It's like the if it bleeds we can kill it kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a good that's a great one. And that of course is completely fictional, totally fabricated. That never happened. But that's a nice little, I mean, there's a good use of cinematic liberty to kind of increase the drama. Like, so if it bleeds we can kill, that's a great way to get where that's where Frost got his in, to be able to finally get to him, because Nixon is just this titanic figure of, I mean, you watch that first question when he has like one question and he talks for 23 minutes or something on one question, which is just a stall tech. He's just Zabiscoing him, just stalling to waste the time and not for Frost not to be able to ask him any more questions about tough things. So he finally was able to get to him with that, and I thought that was just a really cool tactic.
Goldust versus the Ultimate Warrior, 100%.
Oh my gosh, what a terrible match!
You meant installing, bud.
I love it when Frost gives him those shoes at the end of the movie.
That's a great, really like you could have done a more serious movie, and as long as you have the Italian shoe gimmick going throughout, you have like levity throughout the movie. Okay, so the debating is wonderful. What I thought was really well established, beyond just Nixon totally blowing Frost out of the water in the first interview with Stalling, was the way he talked about his penchant for debate before they even met, where he's like, if TV didn't exist, I'm president 8 years before I'm president. It's just like they didn't like the way I look, but I can debate anyone out of the water. People who listened on the radio thought I won.
I sweat on my upper lip, he's
right.
Like, that's the thing, like they have to cut away every time before he answers so he can dab the sweat off his lip or something, because he doesn't want, he's very vain, or not vain.
No, he's got the yips. He's self-conscious because it screwed him before.
Yeah, that's more what I was looking for. Not vain so much as self-conscious.
And he has these great little digs, like when he, first off, you get that he's racist when he finds out that Frost has dated a black woman before. And then like later on, he uses that. He's like, so did you fornicate last night right before the cameras roll? It's like, oh my God, what a bastard.
Yeah.
If you really like movies like Rush, I think this is going to like totally speak to you, and everything I say is going to sound like a annoying nitpick. But if you think Rush is just okay, then I say, watch it, but just know that it's not Good Night and Good Luck. It's not Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. It's not Tar. It's something else. Oscars, lay them out.
Yeah, it didn't win any, unfortunately, but it did get nominated for 5. It was up for Best Picture. Your boy Ron Howard was nominated for Best Director. Frank Langella, of course, for Best Actor. Best Adapted Screenplay. It was adapted from a stage play in which both Frank Langella and Michael Sheen played the parts on stage as well,
cool.
Which I think was very interesting. And I'd love to see how they played it on stage, and if there was any if there's any differences at all, I think that would have been interesting. And then Best Film Editing, which a lot of Best Picture nominees pick up film editing nominations too. So went 0 for 5, but still that was a pretty good tally, especially when Slumdog Millionaire was the big one that year, won like 8 out of its 10 nominations or something. And then Milk was the Best Actor winner. Sean Penn won for Milk, which is whatever. I mean, I would have loved it if Frank
Mickey Rourke.
But Mickey Rourke should, if Mickey Rourke didn't win, I would have liked it if Frank Langella could have won, because he was amazing in it too. But I mean, we all agree on this podcast that Mickey Rourke was the rightful winner that year.
I remember that was my first Oscars watching in New York City and being like, I like Milk a lot. He already has an Oscar.
And it was like 5 years. It was not even that like long ago. Like if Denzel wins an Oscar this year for Gladiator 2, like if they give him a supporting actor, like it's been over 20 years since he's won an Oscar. Like fine, you know, give him another one. That's cool. You know, like Denzel's awesome. But yeah, like if it's like within 5 years, I mean, come on, give it to somebody else. Like Frances McDormand doesn't need a third one like 3 years after she won her second.
Give me a break.
Yeah, I love Frances though. Frances, love you.
And it's funny because like I like Tom Hanks's back-to-back wins, but I wouldn't be mad. Like spread the wealth. Come on.
Right.
And Mickey Rourke, just like, oh my God. And even though his career really like did not come back after that, that's a great performance in a 5-star movie.
Yeah, I mean, the performance that's one for the ages. And I mean, like I said, Penn is great too in that movie. It's a very good movie. He's very good in it.
Yeah, I like Milk.
But yeah, but The Wrestler is, I mean, that's an all-timer performance.
I don't think we're going to be able to see Michael Sheen and Frank Langella reprise these roles on Broadway. Pretty sure Langella is retired. Yes,
I believe that's correct.
I think Trial of the Chicago 7 was kind of it for him. Another great angry role for him.
Yeah, he was very good in that.
Okay, shall we do our top 10s of 2008?
Let us, yes. I have a couple of honorable mentions. First, I'll just say Hunger is almost made my top 10. I have it at number 12. I have a couple of amazing comedies that I just love. They are Forgetting Sarah Marshall and Role Models. They're in my honorable mentions. Watched them both so many times. I love them to death. Kung Fu Panda came out the year is in my honorable mentions. There's a couple of movies that I think are a little bit lesser seen that I love. One called The Visitor with Richard Jenkins. One with Woody Harrelson called Trans-Siberian. That's really good. A couple of international movies that year that came out I loved. Let the Right One In, Gomorrah, The Counterfeiters, all very good. And then there's an Annie Hathaway movie called Rachel Getting Married that I really like. Jonathan Demme directed that. Very good.
That's a never did it for me that I've always wanted to see.
I think you'd really like it. So 2008 is a very strong year. I mean, those movies that I just listed off are all very good and could have been in a top 10 very easily. In fact, after talking about Hunger, I might have to readjust my list, but that's for another time. Let's go with the top 10 as it is right now. My top 10, number 10 is the Best Picture winner from that year, Slumdog Millionaire. There was a lot of backlash against that movie, but that always happens to the Best Picture winner. Slumdog Millionaire is great.
That's good.
Yeah, it's just a great movie. Number 9 is a film from France. It's called Tell No One. Just a great mystery. Guy gets an email from his wife one day, but the thing is, his wife was murdered several years earlier, so he has to figure out why he's getting this email. Just an awesome mystery. I saw it at the Traverse City Film Festival. I remember hearing that Ben Affleck was supposed to direct an American remake of it, but I don't think it ever came to pass for whatever reason. But if you get a chance ever to check out this movie called Tell No One, it's just awesome. Number 8, the aforementioned Milk. It's excellent. Sean Penn is great in it. Josh Brolin is great in it. James Franco, Emile Hirsch, just a strong cast, great story. My number 7 is Mike Leigh's film, and the first thing that I saw Sally Hawkins in, and the reason why I like her, and it's called Happy Go Lucky. It's also the first thing I really remember seeing Eddie Marsan in, but given that he's in like a million movies, it probably wasn't. But it's just the first thing that I really remember seeing him in, and he's just fantastic in it.
I think Eddie Marsan is about to pop up in this video. Talk about him so much.
Eddie, if you're listening, we'd love to have you on someday.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. My number 6, the movie we talked about at great length, is Frost Nixon. I still really love it. Number 5 is another French film. It was the Palme d'Or winner. It's called The Class. I believe, I haven't seen it since it came out, but I believe what this movie said, there was a lot of actual students that they put in the movie and just kind of talked about their actual experiences in class, and they kind of built the movie around that. Very cool. Really good choice for the Palme d'Or that year. My number 4 is Christopher Nolan's hugely popular The Dark Knight, and widely considered the reason why we have 10 Best Picture nominees now, because that movie made a bajillion dollars and was nominated for 8 Academy Awards, and yet somehow did not get a Best Picture or Director nomination out of that. My number 3 is a film I watched earlier this year and am just absolutely enamored with. It's called In Bruges. It's Martin McDonagh's.
Had you not seen it before this year?
Oh no, I'd seen it this year, but I said I rewatched it. Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. I'm glad I misheard that.
Or maybe I said it wrong. I might have misspoke, but I rewatched it earlier this year. Yeah. I'm just absolutely enamored with it. I loved it the first time I saw it, and I love it just as much now. About morally questionable hitmen that you love anyway, hanging around Bruges, trying to figure out their next move. Colin Farrell is just extraordinary in this. Brendan Gleeson is wonderful in this. They're so good together. If you like Banshees of Inisherin, they're also just terrific together in this, but Ralph Fiennes just blows the doors off this movie. You can almost, I think I saw this in a Letterboxd review, where you can divide your life into 2 sections, and that is before you hear Ralph Fiennes call his wife an inanimate fucking object, and after.
Inanimate fucking object!
And it's just so good. It's Yeah, just a phenomenal movie. And somehow there are two movies that year that were better than In Bruges, and they're just two all-time classics. Number two is Pixar's Wall-E, just a beautiful movie from start to finish, an absolute stone-cold classic. And then number one, we've already mentioned it a couple times, Aronofsky's The Wrestler, just a perfect movie.
As often happens with these more recent years, although this is 16 years ago, which is depressing, a lot of your honorable mentions are in my list and vice versa, but there's a few differences. I'm going to just real quick run down my honorable mentions because I think they're all worth talking about. Mm-hmm. Hellboy 2, The Golden Army, I think my second favorite Guillermo del Toro movie after Nightmare Alley, and I don't know, Blade 2, also good. But really, really like Hellboy 2. It's one of the better comic book sequels. Goes in a completely different direction than the first one. Just amazing creature effects like you wouldn't believe. The Hurt Locker, Catherine Bigelow's. Where's Catherine Bigelow?
Yeah, since Detroit. She hasn't done anything since Detroit, right?
I want her back.
I mean, that's an 09 for me, obviously, so that's why it's on my list.
I got two other 09s on this list that are 09s for you, but Iron Man, the first Iron Man, I think is worth mentioning just for what it wrought. This one I like less each time I watch it. This used to be, I think, in my top 10 and now no longer, but I still think it's quite good. And
just fell off my list when I put Hunger on, so yeah, I agree. It's
the Slumdog Millionaire I have, Me and Orson Welles, which we talked about at great length for our 2009 episode, but it came out in, I think, Festival Circuit in 08. Yep. Waltz with Bashir, animated pseudo-documentary movie about the Lebanese civil war and Israel's involvement in it. Incredible. Doubt, John Patrick Shanley? Is that how you say his name? John Patrick Shanley, which is an adaptation of a stage play, and I just think unbelievable. Love Doubt. Number 13, I have Milk. Number 12, I have Gran Torino. Just but Juror number 2 is out now. It's supposed to be very good, if you can see it, which Warner is apparently making very difficult.
For reasons unknown.
I don't know. But I quite like Gran Torino. We're both Michigan people. You know, that's his Michigan movie.
Yeah.
And then another one you have for 2009 is Ponyo, is another one of my honorable mentions, which I just think is terrific. The Japanese Little Mermaid. Very good.
Very good.
All right, my top 10. My number 10 is Tropic Thunder, Ben Stiller's prelude to Severance. This was like when I realized he was a good director, although I do want to go back and watch Cable Guy, even though Zoolander 2 is trash. Anyway, Tropic Thunder is great. I still see people getting upset about the blackface as if that's not the point. That's bad.
That's not my complaint with it. I don't like the movie, but that's not my complaint with it.
What is your complaint?
I just don't think it's that funny.
That's a good complaint for a comedy.
But there are things about it I love. But yeah, I don't like Ben Stiller or Jack Black in it. I don't think either of them are that funny.
Got it. I disagree. It's my number 10.
A lot of people do. I'm very much in the minority on that one.
I wonder who's going to get mad at this. My number 9 is The Dark Knight. Why isn't it number 1? Because I like it number 9.
Yeah.
That's why. Dark Knight is the best crime movie to be made out of a comic book ever, probably. Yeah, it's just awesome. Heath Ledger's incredible. But so is the whole cast. I like Batman Begins more than The Dark Knight in that trilogy. I think it's the better overall movie. But this movie, there are some weird continuity errors in The Dark Knight, which doesn't necessarily matter, but I cannot get past them. The action scenes are unreal. Heath Ledger is unreal. It's very, very good. And now you said you're like, I'm forgetting Sarah Marshall and role models in my honorable mentions. The amount that we talk about these movies, I'm ashamed of you. I am frankly ashamed of you. So Role Models is my number 8. This is David Wayne's best movie, and David Wayne is a good filmmaker, and Role Models is incredible. And you are Ben Affleck, and that is not okay that you left it out.
I sing "Love Take Me Down to the Streets" multiple times a week.
That's by Wings, right?
Yeah, it's one of their hits from the 70s. Yeah.
My number 7 is a James Gray movie called Two Lovers, starring Gwyneth Paltrow and Joaquin Phoenix, which I am dying for you to watch. Would have been the Never Did It for this year had it not been Hunger. Joaquin Phoenix is just like a mixed up Jew in Brooklyn who falls in love with Shiksagatist Gwyneth Paltrow, but she's not quite what he needs. And he has another lady in his life who's played by Vanessa Shaw, the beautiful Vanessa Shaw. And it's just wonderful. And his dad is played by Moni Moshanov, who I think is one of the more underrated character actors. He's a Georgian Israeli actor. He's incredible in this. He's great in Late Marriage, a Georgian Israeli movie that I really like. And I love that James Gray found him and put him in stuff. It's awesome.
Joaquin is grandfathered into that. We allow him to play Jews. We're good with that.
Yeah, because he's Jewish.
I know.
Jewish people are allowed to play Jews. Yeah. But Vanessa Shaw plays Jewish in this and is not. And Isabella Rossellini also plays Jewish in this and is not.
I'm just making the joke because so many people in James Gray movies who do play Jewish are not Jewish.
That's true. In fact, everyone in Armageddon Time is not Jewish. It's really not. But But Joaquin stars in a lot of James Gray movies. Like Joaquin's in a ton of these like Brooklyn James Gray movies, and he's very good in them.
Yeah.
My number 6 is In Bruges. I don't know what else I could say about this that you didn't already say. The violence in this movie is limited but shocking. And yeah, Ray Fiennes' teeth. Also, we got to talk about the Twizzleton teeth. Very good. And I think maybe this or Payphone were the movies where I was like, oh, Colin Farrell's good actually. Okay, cool.
I saw a couple things before that. He's in like a movie called Intermission. There was a couple things that every couple of years something would come out. We'd be like, "Ooh, hello," and then he would do like Miami Vice or something. We'd be like, "Ugh," but he's on a good path now.
People love Miami Vice.
What? Oh man, are we gonna get hate for that too?
I don't know. I think it's stupid, but people love it.
Bad man, that movie's terrible.
My number 5 is Hunger. We've talked about it at great length. Listen to the whole podcast. If you're hearing this on a YouTube short, listen to the podcast. It's very good.
It's a good one.
My number 4 is Forgetting Sarah Marshall, which I think is one of the greatest comedies of all time and is apparently not thought so by the Letterboxd community, who gave it a 3.3. What the heck? I think this movie's great. It's got Muppets. It's got Jason Segel at his peak. So good.
I mean, Bill Hader just being hilarious every time he opens his mouth. I mean,
I'm basically being Bill Hader in the movie right now. You only see him via FaceTime, and then also at the end he overacts in a Dracula musical.
He's always wearing his leather jacket.
He's so great. Mila Kunis is hotter than the sun in this movie, and Kristen Bell is so funny.
Oh my god, he is hilarious. And even Russell Brand, who's like insufferable now, unbelievably funny in this movie.
So I think we do have to ding the movie a little bit because it made Russell Brand more famous.
Yeah.
But then you have also Jonah Hill going from 6 to midnight and just being very, very funny.
Yeah. Hey, I brought you some coconut cake, stuff from the hotel, definitely not from me. Yeah. Or everything Paul Rudd does, like I just
my god,
I don't carry I just don't have I don't have a watch anymore. Like, oh man, that's so cool. Yeah, I just have the time on my phone.
Right.
It's like every little line in that movie is like funny in some way.
Right. I guess I'm 40.
Yeah. You get bit by a shark, are you gonna give up surfing? Probably, yeah.
They call me Kunu. Oh, cool. What does that mean? Chuck.
Yeah. Saw him beat up a guy with a starfish once. Come on, really? Guy was me.
It's a perfect movie. My number 3 is The Wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I wish that this had signaled more for Mickey Rourke than just playing a legless villain in Iron Man 2. I don't know if I want to explain that joke this time. Go searching in through the podcast history and see if I know I explained it at some point. Hi, Mom. This is my favorite Aronofsky movie, and I quite like probably like 3/4 of Aronofsky's movies.
Mm-hmm.
Noah's pretty boring, but
it's terrible though. But yeah, it's not. It's like second. It's probably second worst of his movies.
It's definitely not terrible. What would we say the worst is? The Fountain.
Fountain. Yeah.
Fountain's bad.
Yeah, Fountain's bad.
Mother's weird but interesting, if not great.
Yeah.
And then I quite like all of them. I'm a whale defender. I'm the whale defender.
I like The Whale.
I like Pi, but don't think it's great. I was just talking about how Breathless gave us Pi, and it's kind of annoying. And Requiem is really tough. But
Requiem's tough, but it's very good. Black Swan is great.
Incredible.
Yeah.
He's an interesting filmmaker, which is more than you can say for a lot of people churning out content these days. And The Wrestler is his best movie. It's just so heartfelt. We talked about this on our No Holds Barred episode, but it's like the most real wrestling has ever seemed in a movie to me. Like, they're calling stuff in the ring. They're getting across like why someone would be a wrestler, not to win, but to like win over the crowd and because you're an egomaniac.
To fill the hole in your heart and your soul and everything. Yeah. I mean, it's gorgeous. In
like 2006 or 2007, maybe even earlier, I watched a shoot interview. So for those who don't know, shoot interviews, I don't even know if they really exist anymore now that kayfabe, which is the magic of keeping wrestling, making believe that wrestling is real, is so gone. But shoot interviews were something that hucksters would do interviews out of character with wrestlers, and you could buy them, and they were often interesting. And Raven, the wrestler Raven, did one, Scott Levy, where he talked about like what it would mean to be a professional wrestler, like what kind of person you have to be, and how like mentally damaged everyone who wants to be a professional wrestler probably is. And The Wrestler like fully taps into that. Shout out to Nigel McGuinness for his brief appearance in The Wrestler.
That's right, yeah.
And the cat Ernest Miller for his not brief appearance. I think Ernest Miller's quite good in that movie.
Yeah, he is, absolutely. Ring of Honor shows, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Gives it definitely that helps with the realism factor for sure. I mean, there's Ring of Honor crowd there, and Ring of Honor crew and everything. I mean, yeah, it's super well done. And at no point at any point in time, I stress, was Hulk Hogan ever considered to play the lead role in this movie?
Doesn't make a lick of sense. No, stop.
I hate him so much.
I was going to say it's actually not believable that Randy the Ram would be at a Ring of Honor show, but Jerry Lynn was champion. So what do I know?
Yeah, it's actually perfectly believable.
My number 2 is Kung Fu Panda. I think this is a perfect action movie. I love it so much. And I think this trilogy is great. It's unfortunate that there's 4 of them. And the first one is just it's my second favorite movie of 2008, and it's one of my favorite movies ever. But it is topped by a different animated movie, WALL-E, which I think is one of the best movies of all time. From the silent film we got at the beginning to the fact that it got me to watch Hello Dolly, which is another great movie. I think its message is really good. I see a lot of people be like, oh, when it gets on the spaceship and you've got the John Ratzenberger and Jeff Garlin of it all, that it's less good. I don't agree with that. I think it remains completely charming and prescient. We got to do something about the environment, y'all. We are screwed.
It's no better than it was in 2008. In fact, it's way worse.
Oh, it's much, much worse.
Yeah.
It's much worse. I'm under a drought and wildfire advisory right now. I live in Jersey City. What is going on? WALL-E's a perfect movie. WALL-E, I believe, is the only Pixar movie that is part of the Criterion Collection. So that's an interesting note, too. Any other thoughts on the films of 2008?
No, I mean, like you said, just with the list of movies that we just listed out there, I mean, 2008 was a really, really strong year for a lot of, different types of movies and different, genres and mediums, just a lot of really, really cool stuff. I'd have to look, we didn't even mention any of the documentaries that came out that year, but there's a lot of good documentaries that came out that year too. Yeah, really, really strong year.
This is, I think, the second longest episode we've ever done that didn't have a guest.
Oh, damn, look at that. Yeah, 55 minutes.
Yeah. It won't be 55 minutes by the time I get done with it.
Good.
Cool. We'll see you next week with a special guest, Jeff Richardson. Professor Jeff is back.
Yes.